The air in the Chestnut Ridge Community Center's conference room was stale, with the scent of cheap coffee and institutional deference. Jeffrey Green stood before the three members of the Architectural Control Committee, his hands resting on the polished veneer of the table. Between his fingers lay a crisp, large-format land survey, its precise black lines and stamped certification a testament to empirical fact. "As you can see," Jeffrey said, his voice calm and measured, a habit honed over 2 decades of explaining complex insurance claims. "The survey, conducted by a licensed state surveyor and filed with the county, confirms that the shed's foundation slab is located a full 18 inches inside my property line. It does not encroach on the common area." He tapped the thick blue line demarcating his lot from the manicured green space behind it. The evidence was irrefutable. It was a matter of latitude and longitude, of legal record and physical reality. Cynthia King, president of the Chestnut Ridge Homeowners Association and de facto chair of this committee, did not look at the survey. Her gaze remained fixed on Jeffrey, a small, serene smile playing on her lips. She wore a tailored navy blazer, and her silver hair was coiffed into a helmet of immovable perfection. Beside her, 2 other board members, a nervous-looking man named Dale and a woman who had yet to make eye contact, shuffled their papers. Cynthia let the silence stretch, a tool she wielded with surgical precision. She tapped a long, manicured nail against a bound copy of the community's covenants, conditions, and restrictions. "The committee thanks you for your input. Mr. Green, your diligence in obtaining a survey is commendable." Jeffrey felt a knot of cold dread tighten in his stomach. The word commendable was delivered with the same faint praise one might use for a child's clumsy drawing. "However," Cynthia continued, her voice as smooth and hard as Riverstone, "the issue at hand is not a simple matter of property lines. It concerns Article 8, Section 4.2 of the CC&Rs. She opened the book to a dog-eared page. I quote, "No structure shall be erected or maintained which may obstruct the visual enjoyment of any common elements from another lot." The board's long-standing interpretation is that the undeveloped green space behind your property constitutes a view corridor. Your shed, regardless of its precise placement, infringes upon that corridor. Jeffrey stared at her, baffled. "Interpretation. The document you just cited refers to obstructions on common elements. My shed is not on a common element. It's on my private lot. The language is unambiguous." Cynthia's smile did not waver. "That is your interpretation. Mr. Green, the board's interpretation differs. The committee thanks you for your time." She picked up her pen and made a neat checkmark on a form in front of her. "The violation is upheld. You will receive a formal notice of our decision, along with the updated fine schedule, via certified mail." She looked past him, a clear dismissal. Next on the agenda, the petition for seasonal lawn gnome variance. Dale fidgeted, clearing his throat. The other members stared intently at her notepad. The hearing, which Jeffrey had spent 2 weeks preparing for, was over. He had presented a legal fact. In return, he had been handed a subjective, indefensible opinion masquerading as a ruling. Humiliation washed over him, hot and sharp. He had followed the rules, presented evidence, and spoken respectfully. None of it had mattered. He was a man who built his life on the bedrock of verifiable facts. And he had just been told that facts were irrelevant here. Power was the only thing that mattered. And Cynthia King held all of it. He carefully rolled up his survey, the crisp paper crackling in the oppressive silence. As he turned to leave, he saw Cynthia's reflection in the glass of the conference room door. Her serene smile was gone, replaced by a look of cold, triumphant satisfaction. 4 weeks earlier, the world had been one of simple, joyful projects. Jeffrey Green stood on his back patio, the late spring sun warming his shoulders, and admired his handiwork. The shed was a masterpiece of suburban craftsmanship. He'd built it himself from a pre-designed kit, a small, 8 by 10-foot structure with a gambrel roof and charming window boxes. It wasn't for lawnmowers or rusty tools. It was for his 9-year-old daughter, Amelia, an art studio. Inside, the walls were lined with pegboard for her brushes and tools. A small easel stood near the window, which overlooked the meticulously maintained common area, a wide, unbroken expanse of perfect green turf. He could already picture Amelia inside, dappled in sunlight, happily painting the vibrant, messy canvases he adored. It was a monument to his love for his family. He and his wife, Beverly, had moved to Chestnut Ridge 9 months ago, seeking exactly this, a quiet, orderly life, a safe street for Amelia to ride her bike, good schools, and a sense of community. Jeffrey, a meticulous and analytical insurance fraud investigator, appreciated the neighborhood's predictability. Beverly, a corporate counsel specializing in contract law for a large tech firm, appreciated the ironclad nature of the community's governing documents. "They're airtight," she'd said one evening, reviewing the thick binder of CC&Rs before they closed on the house. "Restrictive, but clear. As long as you follow the rules to the letter, there are no ambiguities." That first week, Jeffrey had done just that. He'd spent an evening with a highlighter and the CC&Rs, dutifully marking every relevant clause. He found Article 8, Section 4.2, the one Cynthia would later weaponize, and noted its precise language obstructions on common elements. He'd also highlighted another, seemingly unrelated clause in a different section. Article 12, Section 1.5. The Board of Directors reserves the right to make amendments to land use designations or easements under special circumstances, without a full community vote, provided such amendments are deemed to be in the best interest of the association. It seemed like standard boilerplate, a legal footnote for minor administrative adjustments. He'd thought nothing more of it. He submitted the architectural application for the shed, including the kit's specifications and a hand-drawn site plan, marking its proposed location well within his property line. 2 weeks later, he received an approval letter signed by the Architectural Control Committee. Construction was a weekend-long affair. A blur of sawdust, leveled foundations, and the satisfying thud of a hammer. Beverly brought him lemonade, and Amelia helped by painting a brightly colored rock to serve as a doorstop. They were happy. Their life was a well-ordered contract. Every clause fulfilled, every obligation met. They paid their dues on time, mowed their lawn to the prescribed height, and brought their trash bins in by the mandated hour. They were, by every measure, perfect residents. Their first and only interaction with Cynthia King before the shed had been at the annual Fall Festival. She moved through the crowd with the practiced grace of a seasoned politician, shaking hands, remembering names, her smile a fixture of benevolent authority. When she greeted them, her eyes had lingered on Jeffrey for a fraction of a second too long. "Jeffrey and Beverly Green," she'd said, her voice warm. "The insurance investigator and the lawyer. Quite the power couple. We're so glad to have you." At the time, it had felt like a welcome. Looking back from the sterile silence of the conference room, Jeffrey realized it had been an appraisal. The first notice arrived on a Monday, exactly 1 week after he'd hammered the last shingle into place on the shed's roof. It was not an official violation. It was a courtesy notice, printed on cheerful, cream-colored letterhead bearing the Chestnut Ridge HOA logo. It was tucked neatly into the handle of their front door. Beverly brought it in with the mail. "Looks like we've been initiated," she said with a light laugh, handing it to him. Jeffrey read the polite, carefully worded text. Dear resident of 114 Willow Creek Lane. This is a friendly courtesy notice from the Chestnut Ridge HOA. It has come to our attention that a new accessory structure has been erected on your property. While we applaud your efforts to enhance your home, we wish to remind you of our community's commitment to maintaining aesthetic harmony and protecting the shared visual enjoyment of our beautiful common areas. Please review Article 8, Section 4.2 of the CC&Rs concerning potential obstructions. We are confident this is a simple misunderstanding and look forward to your prompt cooperation in resolving the matter. Sincerely, Cynthia King, President, Chestnut Ridge, HOA. The tone was unnervingly pleasant, the language of a concerned neighbor rather than a bureaucratic enforcer. But the implication was clear. Jeffrey felt a prickle of irritation, a misunderstanding. He'd followed the rules. He had an approval letter. It's signed by Cynthia, he told Beverly, showing her the paper. She's citing the obstruction clause. Beverly scanned it, her legal mind instantly deconstructing the language. It's intentionally vague. It doesn't state a violation, just a potential one. It doesn't demand a specific action, just cooperation. This is the first step in the due process chain. It's designed to be non-confrontational. But it's wrong, Jeffrey insisted. The shed isn't on the common area. I double-checked the survey plat before I even bought the kit. I know, Beverly said calmly. So, we respond in kind, polite, professional, and with documentation. This is just a conversation. Don't treat it like a fight yet. That evening, Jeffrey composed a meticulously polite email to the HOA board. He attached a scanned copy of his original ACC approval letter and a digital image of his property survey plat from their closing documents, highlighting his lot lines. Subject Recourtesy Notice, 114 Willow Creek Lane. Dear Ms. King and members of the board, thank you for the courtesy notice regarding our new accessory structure. We appreciate the board's commitment to maintaining our community's standards. To clarify the matter, please find attached our ACC approval letter for the shed, dated April 12th, as well as a copy of our property survey, as the survey clearly indicates. The structure is located entirely on our private property and does not encroach upon any common elements. We believe this documentation resolves the potential misunderstanding referenced in your notice. Please let us know if you require any further information. Best regards, Jeffrey Green. He hit send, confident that the clear, documented facts would put the issue to rest. It was, as Cynthia's letter had suggested, just a simple misunderstanding. A week passed in silence. Jeffrey assumed the matter was closed. The crisp, factual nature of his email, backed by the HOA's own approval letter, left no room for debate. He watched Amelia set up her easel in the new shed, her small face alight with joy, and felt the satisfaction of a problem neatly solved. Then, on Saturday morning, the mail carrier knocked on the door. He held a clipboard and a green certified mail slip. Signature required for Mr. Jeffrey Green, he said, his expression impassive. Jeffrey signed the slip and accepted the stiff, business-sized envelope. The return address was the Chestnut Ridge HOA's management company. A cold feeling. The same one he felt when an insurance claim file revealed its first layer of deception, settled in his gut. Inside was a formal notice of violation. The friendly tone of the courtesy notice was gone, replaced by the cold, unyielding language of bureaucracy. Violation notice. Date: June 1st, 2023. Property: 114 Willow Creek Lane. Certified mail. USPS 9407-8102 0505 6108 3214 29. Dear Mr. Green, this letter serves as a formal notice of a continuing violation of the Chestnut Ridge Homeowners Association's governing documents. The Architectural Control Committee has reviewed the accessory structure shed on your property and determined it to be in violation of CC&R Article 8, Section 4.2, Obstructions on Common Elements, by means of infringing upon the designated view corridor. Your correspondence of May 25th has been received and reviewed by the Board. The Board's interpretation of the governing documents stands. The initial ACC approval is hereby rescinded on the grounds of a material impact not fully appreciated at the time of the initial application. Remedy required complete removal of the violating structure. Deadline for compliance: June 15, 2023, 14 days from date of notice. Fine. A fine of 100 ZAL has been assessed to your account. This fine will accrue at a rate of $25 per day for each day the violation remains uncorrected after the compliance deadline. You have the right to request a hearing before the Board of Directors to contest this violation. A request for a hearing must be submitted in writing within 10 days of the date of this notice. The letter was a declaration of war. They had rescinded a valid approval, ignored his evidence, and started a financial clock ticking against him. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a targeted attack. They can't just rescind an approval, Jeffrey said, his voice tight with anger as Beverly read the letter over his shoulder. That's not how contracts work. We relied on that approval. We invested time and money. It's a legal gray area, Beverly said, her expression grim. They'll argue material impact. It's a weak argument, but they're betting we won't have the stomach or the resources to fight it in court. This is a pressure tactic. That afternoon, Jeffrey took a walk, hoping to gauge the neighborhood's temperature. He saw a neighbor, Tom, out washing his car. Tom had been friendly just last week, borrowing a wrench. Hey, Tom. Jeffrey started. Quick question for you. Have you ever had any dealings with the HOA board, specifically with Cynthia King? Tom stopped scrubbing and suddenly seemed intensely interested in a spot on his fender. Oh, you know, just the usual stuff. They run a tight ship. Cynthia keeps things looking nice. He didn't meet Jeffrey's eye. Gotta finish this up before the kids get home. Good seeing you. He turned away, his retreat polite but unmistakable. He tried 2 other neighbors. The responses were variations on the same theme, evasive pleasantries, a clear unwillingness to be drawn into a conversation about Cynthia or the board. It was as if an invisible wall had been erected around him. He was on his own. He realized with a chilling certainty that Cynthia's power wasn't just procedural, it was social. She had cultivated a community of quiet compliance. To cross her was to risk becoming an outsider. He returned home, the sense of isolation more potent than the anger. This was a carefully constructed trap, and he had walked right into it. Okay, he said to Beverly, spreading the letters and his survey on the kitchen table. If this is a fight she wants, then this is a fight she'll get. But we do it your way. By the book. Every I dotted. Every T crossed. He wrote out a formal request for a hearing, citing his right to due process as outlined in the violation notice itself, and sent it via certified mail the next morning. The paper trail had begun. The HOA's response to his hearing request was prompt and procedurally flawless. A letter arrived scheduling his appearance before the ACC in 3 weeks, conveniently allowing the daily fines to begin accruing before he even had a chance to state his case. The battle had shifted from his backyard to his desk. Jeffrey, a man whose profession was to find the truth buried in mountains of paperwork, now applied that same forensic intensity to his own life. He spent his evenings poring over the Chestnut Ridge, governing documents, the CC&Rs, the bylaws, the rules and regulations. He cross-referenced articles, looked for loopholes, and highlighted any clause pertaining to the board's authority and homeowner rights. Beverly acted as his legal strategist. They're operating in a procedural gray area, so we have to force them onto black and white terrain. She advised, "We need their records, meeting minutes, financial statements, all correspondence related to land use. State statutes grant us the right to inspect association records. We file a formal records request." Jeffrey drafted the request. Citing the relevant state code, he asked for all board meeting minutes from the past 7 years, specifically requesting any discussions related to the common area behind his property. He also requested financial records, contracts with landscapers, and any and all architectural applications approved or denied for lots adjacent to common area view corridors. He sent it via certified mail, creating another entry in his growing evidence file. The HOA's management company slow-walked the request. A week later, he received a reply stating that his request was overly broad and would require significant time and expense to fulfill. They quoted him a fee of several $100s for document retrieval and redaction services. "They're stonewalling," Jeffrey told Beverly, frustrated. "They're legally required to provide these, but they're making it as difficult and expensive as possible." "Pay it," Beverly said without hesitation. "Get a cashier's check. We want a clean record of payment. The redactions will be the most telling part. What they hide is more important than what they show." While waiting for the documents, Jeffrey knew he needed more than what the HOA was willing to give him. He needed the history of the land itself. He thought of Arthur Vance, a retired county surveyor and an old friend of his late father. Arthur was a cantankerous but brilliant man who treated property records like sacred texts. He found Arthur in his dusty home office, surrounded by rolled-up maps and ancient-looking survey equipment. After explaining the situation, Arthur's eyes lit up with the fire of a challenge. "A view corridor interpretation, that's developer doublespeak. My boy, a view isn't a legal entity unless it's protected by a specific recorded easement. Let's go to the county recorder's office. Let's see what the land itself has to say." The next day, they were in the basement of the county administration building, a place that smelled of old paper and microfilm. The clerk, a helpful woman in her late 60s, pulled the master plat map for the Chestnut Ridge subdivision. "Here you are," she said, pointing to Jeffrey's lot. "Lot 114, Section B, and right behind it, Common Area Parcel C." Jeffrey and Arthur studied the map. The lines were clear. There was no mention of a view corridor easement. As the clerk was refiling the map, she paused. "Chestnut Ridge, you know." "That's funny," she mused, tapping a finger on the file cabinet. "I remember there was a quiet title action filed on the adjacent common lot Parcel C about 5 years back. Very unusual for an established HOA common area. Usually, that's for sorting out messy ownership claims on old farmland." Jeffrey's investigator instincts flared. A quiet title action was a lawsuit to resolve competing claims on a property. To make the title quiet. Why would an HOA need to do that for its own common land? "Could we see the file on that action?" Jeffrey asked, his heart starting to beat a little faster. The clerk disappeared into another room and returned with a thin, dusty file folder. Inside were legal documents, and attached to the back was a copy of an easement deed, recorded immediately after the quiet title action was settled. Arthur unrolled it carefully on the table. "Well, I'll be," Arthur breathed. tracing a newly drawn line on the deed with a calloused finger. "Look at this. Jeffrey, 5 years ago, the HOA board granted a drainage and utility easement over the rear 10 feet of Common Area Parcel C to an entity called Ridgeline Development LLC. Jeffrey leaned in. The easement ran along the entire back of the common area, a 10-foot deep strip of land directly behind his own property line. So, they gave away rights to a piece of the common area. They didn't just give away rights, Arthur said, his voice low. They effectively ceded control of that land. Under this easement, Ridgeline Development has the right to access, excavate, and install whatever utilities they need for a future project. The HOA can't build anything permanent there. That 10-foot strip isn't truly common area anymore. It's a development corridor in waiting. The puzzle pieces began to slam into place. The stonewalling, Cynthia's obsession with that specific patch of land. It wasn't about his shed. It was about what his shed represented: a homeowner paying extremely close attention to the precise boundary where the common area met his property. The final piece arrived a week later in a thick manila envelope from the HOA's management company, the requested meeting minutes. As Beverly had predicted, they were heavily redacted. The minutes from the board meetings 5 years ago, the exact time of the quiet title action and easement grant, had entire pages blacked out with thick, dark lines. The official reason cited at the bottom of the page was redacted pursuant to attorney-client privilege related to pending litigation. But there was no pending litigation. The quiet title action had been settled 5 years ago. The redaction was a lie. It was a cover-up. Jeffrey sat at his dining room table. The redacted minutes spread out like a censored government file. Beside them lay the easement deed Arthur had uncovered. The smell of black marker ink seemed to fill the room, a physical manifestation of secrecy. Beverly sat across from him, her sharp legal mind connecting the dots. They used a quiet title action to get a clean title, probably to extinguish any old, forgotten claims on that parcel, she theorized, tapping the deed. Then, immediately after, the board led by Cynthia, who was president then, too, granted this easement to Ridgeline Development. They did it quietly, no announcement to the homeowners. And they used the special circumstances clause, Jeffrey said, recalling the highlighted section from the CC&Rs, Article 12, Section 1.5, the one that lets the board amend land use without a community vote. Exactly, Beverly confirmed. They manufactured a special circumstance to push through a land deal that benefits a private developer, a deal the homeowners would almost certainly have voted against if they'd known about it. Ceding control of common land for free. It makes no sense unless... Her voice trailed off as Jeffrey began typing Ridgeline Development LLC into his laptop. He cross-referenced the corporate registration with state public records. The LLC was registered to a holding company. He dug deeper, using the investigative databases he had access to through his work. He pulled property tax records for the holding company's address. And then he found it, the name listed as the primary officer of the holding company. Cynthia King. Jeffrey read aloud, a wave of cold clarity washing over him. The screen glowed with the undeniable connection. The developer, with ties to Cynthia, is Cynthia. The entire, sordid picture snapped into focus. The harassment wasn't just about protecting a secret. It was about protecting her own corrupt, profitable secret. Years ago, Cynthia had used her position as HOA president to shepherd a fraudulent land transfer, effectively giving a valuable easement on community property to her own shell company for nothing. That easement would be worthless if it couldn't be used. It was likely the key to a future development project on adjacent land, a project that required utility access across the HOA's common area. His little shed, Amelia's art studio, was an existential threat to her scheme. It was a permanent structure, built by a meticulous, rule-following homeowner right on the border of the compromised land. His very presence, his request for surveys, his scrutiny of property lines, it risked drawing unwanted attention to the 10-foot strip of land she had secretly carved out for herself. If another homeowner saw his shed and decided to build one too, or if he decided to put up a fence right on the property line, it could physically obstruct her future development plans, or, worse, trigger a full community review of the property boundaries. "This isn't about a view corridor," Jeffrey said, the pieces locking together with an audible click in his mind. "It's about preventing a precedent. It's about intimidating anyone who pays too much attention to that specific patch of ground." My fight over 18 inches of land could unravel her entire multi-year fraud. Her personal vendetta wasn't just about power, it was about money. Exposing the fraudulent land transfer would not only nullify her deal and destroy her development plans, but it would also open her up to massive civil liability from the homeowners for breach of fiduciary duty. She wasn't just trying to remove his shed. She was trying to protect a lie that was worth a fortune. The fines, the hearings, the social pressure, it was all a calculated campaign of intimidation designed to make him give up and go away before he could stumble upon the truth. But he had. Cynthia King was not a woman who left things to chance. The day after Jeffrey's trip to the county recorder's office, the nature of the harassment shifted from bureaucratic to overtly aggressive. She must have a source inside the county building, someone who had alerted her that he was pulling old records. She knew he was closing in. The first salvo was a formal complaint, filed not with the HOA, but with the city's code enforcement department. The complaint, filed anonymously, but clearly orchestrated by Cynthia, alleged that Jeffrey was running an unlicensed commercial business, an art school for children out of the shed, citing unusual foot traffic and commercial-grade art supplies. It was a complete fabrication, but it had the desired effect. A city inspector, a tired-looking man named Mr. Davies, showed up at their door a few days later, a clipboard in his hand. "We've received a complaint," he said, his tone weary. "I just need to take a look at the structure in the back." Jeffrey escorted him to the shed, his jaw tight with fury. Inside, Amelia's small easel, her watercolor paints, and a few half-finished canvases of flowers, and their family dog were the only occupants. Mr. Davies surveyed the scene for less than a minute. "Right," he said, making a note on his form. "Looks like a kid's playhouse to me. Sorry to have bothered you. We have to follow up on every complaint, no matter how creative." He gave Jeffrey a sympathetic look before he left. But the visit was a clear message from Cynthia. "I can bring the power of the city to your doorstep." The pressure on his family intensified. Amelia came home from school one afternoon, her eyes red. "Some kids at the bus stop said we're going to have to move away," she whispered to Beverly. "They said my dad is a rule breaker, and my art studio is illegal." The poison was spreading, seeping into his daughter's life. That night, Beverly sat with him at the kitchen table, her usual composure strained. "Jeffrey, the HOA just sent us a notice of intent to lien for unpaid fines. They're claiming we owe over $1,000 now. A lien on our house will affect our credit, our mortgage. This is getting serious. Are you sure this is worth it? Maybe we should just take the shed down." Her words hit him harder than any formal notice. For the first time, he saw real fear in her eyes, not for their legal standing, but for their family's peace and financial security. The emotional toll was becoming unbearable. He was losing sleep. His focus at work was suffering, and the constant state of conflict was casting a pall over their home. He looked out the kitchen window at the shed, its cheerful blue paint mocking him. Giving up was the easy path. He could dismantle the structure, pay the fraudulent fines, and buy back his family's tranquility. Cynthia would win. Her corrupt deal would remain secret. The injustice would stand. Or he could risk everything. He could escalate the fight, force a public confrontation, and expose her. It would mean more stress, more expense, and more public scrutiny. He would be betting their home and their savings on the belief that the truth, presented clearly and calmly, could defeat entrenched power. He looked at Beverly, at the worry etched on her face, and then thought of Amelia's tear-streaked cheeks. His anger solidified into a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about a shed or a fraudulent land deal anymore. It was about teaching his daughter that you don't back down from a bully, especially when the bully is wearing a blazer and quoting bylaws. "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "We're not taking it down. I'm signing up for a public comment slot at the annual homeowners meeting next week. I'm going to end this, in front of everyone." The Chestnut Ridge annual homeowners meeting was Cynthia King's coronation. It was held in the same community center as the hearing, but this time the main hall was filled with residents. Most sat with the placid expressions of people fulfilling a civic duty, ready to vote on the budget and approve the new landscaping contract. At the front of the room, Cynthia sat at the center of a long table, flanked by the board of directors. She radiated control. A large digital projector screen behind her displayed the meeting agenda. In the bottom right corner, a small digital clock was counting down. Jeffrey's public comment slot was item number 7 on the agenda, scheduled for 8:15 p.m. 5 minutes. That's all he was allotted. 5 minutes to dismantle an empire of lies. As the meeting droned on through treasurer's reports and committee updates, Jeffrey felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Mr. Henderson, an older, retired gentleman who had served on the board for years. He was the only one who had met Jeffrey's gaze with anything other than suspicion during the ACC hearing. He was the moral compass of the board. "Mr. Green," he whispered, leading Jeffrey to the back of the room. He slipped a plain brown envelope into Jeffrey's hand. "I was troubled by your hearing. I used my board access to pull the original, unscanned minutes from the archives, the ones from 5 years ago. What's in this envelope is an unredacted copy." Jeffrey's breath caught in his throat. This was the final piece, the smoking gun. But Mr. Henderson wasn't finished. His expression was pained. "Before you go up there, there's something you need to know. The land deal. It's corrupt, no question. But if you expose the entire easement deal and force the HOA to nullify it, the board will be legally required to reclaim that 10-foot strip of land. Old Mrs. Gable, at number 128, her prized rose garden. The one that wins the community award every year. It unknowingly sits 3 feet inside that easement. Reclaiming the land will mean tearing her garden out. She's an 80-year-old widow. It would devastate her." The secondary moral dilemma hit Jeffrey like a physical blow. He now held the power not just to achieve justice, but to inflict collateral damage. He could pursue total vengeance, burn Cynthia's entire scheme to the ground, and, in doing so, harm an innocent bystander. Or he could be surgical. He could focus his attack on Cynthia's procedural misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty, the secret meetings. The cover-up enough to remove her from power and void his fines. But leave the land deal itself for the new board to handle with more compassion. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," Jeffrey said, his mind racing. He now knew what he had to do. His goal was justice, not destruction. At 8:14 p.m., Cynthia announced, "We now move to the open comment period. First up is Mr. Jeffrey Green of 114 Willow Creek Lane. You have 5 minutes." A timer appeared on the large screen behind her, its red digits glowing 500. Jeffrey walked to the podium, his heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm. He placed his folder on the lectern and looked out at the faces of his neighbors. "Good evening," he began, his voice clear and steady. The clock ticked to 4:59. "My name is Jeffrey Green. Most of you know me only as the man with the controversial shed. I'm here tonight to talk about that shed, but more importantly, to talk about transparency and the fiduciary duty our board owes to each of us." He projected the first document onto the screen using the provided laptop, the formal notice of violation against him. "Exhibit A," he said, borrowing the language of his profession. "A violation notice citing a view corridor, a term that does not appear anywhere in our governing documents definitions. The claim is that my shed, located on my private property, obstructs a common area." The clock read 4:20. He clicked to the next slide. It was the official county plat map. "Exhibit B, the official plat map for our subdivision. It shows my property line and the common area behind it. It shows no legally recorded view corridor easement, because one does not exist." A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Cynthia sat rigid, her smile frozen in place. The clock showed 3:45. "My investigation into this discrepancy led me to the county recorder's office, which brings me to Exhibit C." He displayed the obscure easement deed. This is a deed, executed 5 years ago by this board, which quietly ceded control of a 10-foot deep portion of our common land to a private developer. This was done without a community vote, using a loophole in our bylaws. The murmuring grew louder. People were sitting up straighter, looking at Cynthia. The clock hit 2:50. "Yes. I filed a formal request for the minutes of the board meetings where this was discussed. This is what I received." He flashed the heavily redacted page on the screen, its black bars a stark symbol of secrecy. The justification was attorney-client privilege, but the relevant litigation was 5 years old. The clock showed 1:30. But the truth has a way of coming out, thanks to a board member who believes in their duty to this community. "I have Exhibit D." He projected 2 documents side by side. On the left, the redacted page. On the right, the unredacted version Mr. Henderson had given him. He zoomed in on the key paragraph. "As you can see," Jeffrey said, his voice ringing with conviction, "the unredacted minutes prove the board, led by President King, held a secret executive session to approve this land transfer to a shell company. A shell company, which public records show, is owned by Cynthia King herself." The room erupted. The sound was a tidal wave of shock and anger. People were on their feet, shouting questions at the board table. Cynthia's face was a mask of cold fury. The serene control was gone, replaced by the raw panic of a cornered animal. The timer on the screen glowed 005, 004, 003, but no one was watching it anymore. Everyone was watching Cynthia King. Jeffrey had not mentioned Mrs. Gable, or even demanded the land deal be voided. He had simply exposed the fraud of the process, the self-dealing, and the lie. He had given the power back to the community. In the ensuing chaos, Mr. Henderson stood up, his voice cutting through the din with practiced authority. "A motion is on the floor," he called out, though no such motion had been formally made. He seized the moment. "I move for an immediate, independent, and comprehensive audit of this association's financials and all land use decisions made by the board for the past 7 years. I further move for the immediate censure of President Cynthia King and her suspension from all presidential duties, pending the outcome of that audit." A chorus of second echoed from a dozen places in the room. The board's vice president, A man who had looked increasingly pale as Jeffrey spoke, stammered, "All in favor." A roar of aye filled the hall. It was nearly unanimous. All opposed. Silence. Even Cynthia's two loyalists on the committee sat with their hands flat on the table, refusing to meet her gaze. "The motion passes," the vice president announced, his voice barely a whisper. Cynthia King stood slowly, her face drained of all color. The mask of fury had been replaced by a chilling emptiness. She gathered her papers with trembling hands, her movements stiff and mechanical, without a word, without a glance at the community she had ruled for so long. She turned and walked out of the community center. Her reign was over, not with a bang, but with the quiet, overwhelming weight of a democratic vote fueled by undeniable truth. Jeffrey felt Beverly's hand find his. He looked at her, and she gave him a small, proud smile. The residents swarmed him, clapping him on the back, shaking his hand, their faces a mixture of gratitude and apology. Tom, the neighbor who had avoided his eyes just weeks ago, came forward. "I'm sorry, man," he said, his expression earnest. "We should have listened. We were afraid." Jeffrey understood. Fear was the currency Cynthia had dealt in, and tonight, its value had plummeted to zero. In the weeks that followed, the independent audit confirmed everything Jeffrey had uncovered, and more. The fraudulent land deal was just the tip of the iceberg. The auditors found evidence of bid rigging with contractors, embezzlement from the reserve fund, and a pattern of using HOA resources for personal gain. Faced with the irrefutable evidence, Cynthia King and two of her allied board members submitted their resignations via email. They were facing not just a community ousting, but potential civil and criminal charges. The newly constituted HOA board, with Mr. Henderson serving as interim president, immediately voided all of Jeffrey's fines and issued a formal apology. They also addressed the easement deed. After a careful legal review and a compassionate discussion with Mrs. Gable, they negotiated a new agreement with the county that nullified the corrupt deal while simultaneously replatting the boundary to officially incorporate the widow's beloved garden into her private lot, protecting it forever. At the next community meeting, the board adopted a new transparency and accountability policy, a set of bylaws drafted pro bono by Beverly. It mandated that all meeting minutes be published online without redaction, that all contracts be subject to open bidding, and that any land use decisions required a full community vote. The era of secret dealings in Chestnut Ridge was over. A month after the annual meeting, a package arrived for Jeffrey. It was from Mr. Henderson. Inside was a handwritten note. "Jeffrey, I thought you might find this interesting. It's from an old local paper I found in my attic. Your father was a good man. It seems a commitment to doing the right thing, no matter the cost. Runs in the family. Charles Henderson." Beneath the note was a yellowed newspaper clipping, dated 1998. The headline read, "City Planner Blocks Controversial High-Density Rezoning." The article detailed how a principled city planner named Daniel Green had single-handedly stopped a lucrative development project on ethical grounds, citing environmental concerns and a lack of community benefit. The developer whose project he had blocked, costing her a potential fortune, was a young, ambitious real estate mogul named Cynthia King. Jeffrey stared at the clipping, the final piece of the puzzle sliding into place. Cynthia's obsession, the sheer disproportionality of her attack over a small shed, had never been just about protecting her fraudulent land deal. It was a 25-year-old grudge. She hadn't just seen him as a threat to her financial scheme. She saw the son of the man who had cost her millions. This was never just business. This was her long-awaited, meticulously planned revenge. He had simply built his daughter's art studio on the battlefield she had chosen long ago. He looked out the window at the little blue shed, where Amelia was inside, painting happily in the afternoon sun. He had won the war. But he had never even known what it was truly about until this very moment. He hadn't just been fighting for his home. He had been unknowingly settling a decades-old score, defending not only his own integrity, but his father's legacy.